everyone, welcome to Cuberviews, episode 55. This is your host, Ian Braverman. Today I'm joined by Harrison Dudek. How you doing?
I'm pretty good, Ian. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you on. How's your day been?
Pretty great. I've been leading up to this in anticipation and thinking about everything I wanted to talk about. So definitely excited to finally get the chance to sit down and chat with you.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I schedule episodes far in advance. So it's like we met in November at CubeCon or
Oh, yeah.
October. And then I was like, hey, you want to talk? But let's do it in February. So
It's all
I've given
good
you
with me,
plenty of
yeah.
time to prepare mentally, I guess.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we met at CubeCon 2025 last year and we played in the Pioneer Showcase Cube. I think I was playing a Bant Coco deck because that's the only thing I know how to play. And what were you playing in that
Yeah,
cube?
I think I was on spellslinger, if I remember correctly. I like picked one to loot tree or something and thought I was slick. If I recall our game correctly, you pretty much steamrolled me with value, and I couldn't do much to stop it. So that was a great way to meet you for sure.
That's so funny. It's so on brand. Like I'm playing Bant Blink. That's all I know how to do. And then today we're talking about the Epic Experiment Cube, which is a Spellslinger cube, and you're playing Spellslinger. It's like, of course.
Exactly. Got to maintain our brands, right?
Yes. How did you like CubeCon? I love CubeCon. I've gone 3 of the 4 years. It's so fun.
Dude, it was amazing. Yeah, it was my first year this time, and just ever since it was over, I just was thinking about going back right away. I'm already making plans with my local play group of where we're staying and all that stuff. So it's a great time.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're from Wisconsin, so pretty close. That makes
Yep,
it easy.
yeah. Yeah, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, for sure. Definitely some people come from all around the country and the world and stuff. So we got it kind of easy.
Yeah, it's a little harder for me. When I travel there, usually it's like from Connecticut to like Charlotte, North Carolina, and then Charlotte brings me to Chicago, and then Chicago to Madison. It's a
Yeah.
crazy trip.
It's a whole odyssey, yeah, for sure.
My little airport where I live does not have a direct flight, unfortunately, that
Oh
I know of
man.
yet. We were talking, and we were just talking about Cube, and then you mentioned this cube, the Epic Experiment, and I was like, "Oh, this sounds really fun. I love these kind of environment context shifting cubes," and so I'm excited to
Oh
talk
yeah.
about it today.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
yeah, first tell me a little about yourself. What was your history with Magic, Cube, some of your
Yeah.
hobbies outside of Cube and Magic?
So my Magic career starts in 2009 with the Duels of the Planeswalkers video game. If anybody remembers that one,
Was
that's
that
how I
on the
learned how to
Xbox
play.
360?
Yeah, I was on 360 and PS3. I don't remember which one I was on because it was like a family friends thing. The second I saw those cards on the screen, I was just instantly hooked for the rest of my life, pretty much.
What was
Played
your
lots
favorite deck or cards that you played on there?
on there. I know the green black elves deck was cracked, and
Ooh,
the first one I ever saw on the screen, I think, was the like rack deck where got ravenous rats and underworld dreams, making people discard and pinging them down and stuff like that, like mono
nice.
black. But yeah, no, that was just a magical time for sure. After I learned, I played lots of standard and draft at an old LGS in the Milwaukee area. First heard of Cube from some judge friends of mine. It sounded really interesting, so I would trade with all the adults for their junk rares because I was a kid at the time. I'd trade for all their junk rares, and I made this like 360 pile of just jank, and I thought it was the best thing ever. Taught a lot of other kids how to draft, so
Wow, so you were
that's
like the cool kid on like the school ground with like the cube, like getting the kid. How old were you?
I was probably like 13 at the time
It was cool.
when I was
Wow.
when I was building them. So definitely a pile of jank, but fond memories for sure. Outside of Cube and Draft, I run my TCG player store and vend conventions for my local LGS. So do some vending side of things. And outside of Magic, I just love to play video games with my wife and hang out with my cats. So
What game you playing right now?
currently on our like 15th playthrough of Baldur's Gate 3 that I never finished. I'll play that. I'll play our stupid Minecraft realm, but I just love all kinds of games in general. So
Do you play Magic Arena too?
off and on, when Powered Cube was on there, I was hitting it pretty heavy.
Yeah.
And then like if there's a draft set that I really sink my teeth into, I'll like kind of grind that. Otherwise, my wife loves to play Brawl, and like we'll just sit there and like just steamroll people basically. So Arena's great.
I download Arena here and there whenever there's like something I'm interested in. I actually did like a bunch of Lorwyn Eclipse drafts, and
Oh yeah.
I thought the set was really fun. just it was really, really open. Like I went elves a couple times. I went Kithkin. I went elementals. There's some really, really cool decks.
Yeah,
I like that form a lot.
yeah, Laurelwind's been a lot of fun for my experience. I've only played it in paper, just like a pre-release and two drafts, but just been a great time on that one for sure too. I don't know what like the meta is or whatever, like what the best deck is, but
Oh, no idea.
there's a lot of good cube playable stuff that was released there as well. So any in-universe Magic set is just like a huge dub.
Lorwyn Eclipse was the worst pre-release I've had in a while, though. I opened some good stuff. I had two of the Kithkin Behold Lord. I
Okay.
had a Johnny. I had some pretty sweet stuff, but I had like no Kithkin and I forced it. So I went blue, white Kithkin
Oh,
and the
okay,
deck was
gotcha.
terrible. And I went 0-3. I was
Well,
like, oh my gosh,
at least you got your shapeshifters to kind of hold it together a little bit, but
couple. And what do you do for work?
so I'm currently apprenticing at a well plumbing and water conditioning company. Been
What
doing it
does
for
that
about
mean? Tell me about that.
4 months now. Yeah. I mean, I grew up in the city with city water, so it's something I never had to think of. But yeah, people out in rural areas, they have wells tapped into the aquifers near their homes, and then, they have to like run pipes that go to the house. And then usually the water comes out and it's either like super full of iron or sulfur and stuff like that. So they need to have water conditioning systems that filter it and like take the iron out and all that. It's a whole mess.
Yeah, my parents' house has a well,
Okay,
and
yeah.
they had to like a few years ago like replace like something on the well to make sure that it was standard with the city and
Oh, yeah.
well water can be like harder water and I don't know, it's a mess.
Yep. Yeah, it gets expensive for sure. Yeah, so I've been really busy doing that. Like I said, the past 4 months. Before that, I was like playing way too much Magic and doing too much. And now that I'm starting to get a little more free time, I'm trying to like dip my toes back in, so to speak. So,
Today I'm excited to talk about the Epic Experiment, which is a cube that each player starts the draft with two copies of the card Epic Experiment.
oh yeah.
What does that card do?
Okay, so it's blue and a red and X for a sorcery that reads exile the top X cards of your library. You may cast instant and sorcery spells with mana value X or less from among them without paying their mana costs. Then put all cards exiled this way that weren't cast into your graveyard. Kind of a mouthful. Like if people are familiar with Genesis Wave, it's like a Genesis Wave, but for instants and sorceries.
Yeah, I mean, this is a funny old card. Like, I remember people running this in like their Mizzix Commander decks
Oh
and
yeah.
just like, I'm going to storm off for like 20, and then they would like hit like 18 lands and then like throw their deck at a wall.
Oh yeah.
And
That's the best feeling right there.
yeah.
I played it in one of my first commander decks. It was Niv Mizzet the Firemind. If people
Ooh,
remember when that was all the hotness. The deck would use mana rocks to ramp and either cast a huge epic experiment or cast Dragonstorm. Are you familiar with
Dragonstorm.
Dragonstorm?
Yeah,
Uh,
what big dragons we getting? What are we doing
just the
here?
jankiest junk rares. You know what I mean? Like I'm a kid, so I don't have like all the expensive cards. I was just buy a bunch of bulk rares, dragons that looked cool. Given enough time, the deck would actually cook.
Now I got to ask you, where's Dragonstorm in the cube?
So funny you mentioned that. I did recently do some edits that added a little pocket of micro synergy that relates to dragons. I was talking to some judge friends of mine, and they said that you can basically cast adventure cards and omen cards with your epic experiment, something with the wording about it. But because of that, I was able to put like a bunch of those omen dragons from Tarkir Dragonstorm in
Yeah.
to like really fill it out. So there is some dragon stuff in the works. And then there has been Storm in the cube at one point. So there could be feasibly a world where Dragonstorm goes back in, but the cube's always shifting and changing. So
Dragonstorm is sick. I put it into my Changeling cube, and I'm fully aware that it's not good, but it's funny. Like,
it's
come on,
so
you see
fun.
Dragonstorm in a pack, and you're like, oh, I can get anything with this.
You got to make it work. Yeah, no, it's just one of those cards that really speaks to you.
Yeah. It's a really interesting cube looking at the list in general for a few reasons. One thing I noticed is it has very few creatures in the cube. White has four creatures, blue 12, black 12, red 11, green 9. So in total in the cube, there are 54 creatures
Yeah.
I saw. That definitely means that it's a spellslinger cube. Want to tell the audience what spellslinger is? Sounds like you're definitely a fan of spellslinger.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, so spell slinging in this cube can look like a handful of different things. Just a short list right here. We make a lot of tokens with things like Young Pyromancer, Sedgemoor Witch, filling our graveyard using cards like Archmage's Newt or Seize the Storm to benefit from that. We have things that pump our team, lots of ramping effects that ramp out big tokens. We can outvalue our opponents with card advantage and disadvantage. And there's also a lot of smaller packages that relate to slinging spells like committing crimes, madness, splice into instant or sorcery, and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I love Spellslinger. I've played it in many cubes. I have it in many cubes. I have it in my peasant cube. What that deck is generally trying to do is it has a lot of cards like Murmuring Mystic that says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you get a 1/1 flyer. It has, like you mentioned, Young Pyromancer. It has a lot of really cheap instants and sorceries like Lightning Bolts, Cantrips. Sometimes you throw in like a big payoff, something like a Rise from the Tides, one of my
Mhm.
favorite cards ever that says what you have in the cube, which I'm
Oh
very
yeah.
happy about. One of my favorite cards. 6 mana, 5 and a blue. Create a tapped 2/2 black zombie creature token for each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard. That's one of my favorite Spellslinger payoffs ever.
Oh yeah, that
But
one's pack one pick oneable here for sure.
oh yeah. It sounds like though, with this cube being all about Spellslinger, like you mentioned, there's many different ways to build Spellslinger than I would think of. Like you said, there's control, there's token decks, there's like a flashback archetype, self-mill. So Spellslinger sounds like it definitely is like a deeper archetype than I think a lot of people would think. And it goes
Yeah,
past just blue red.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was gonna say the cube's not color balanced, but dipping into what green, white, and black do, which are not your traditional spell slinger colors, really brings a lot of depth to the synergies that you can unlock there and the cross synergies between everything, multitude of packages. So that's a really deep experience to explore like what all the colors can really do in that sense.
Yeah, like what do some of the other colors add? For example, looking at white, I see like a lot of token makers, I see board wipes, some really good removal.
Yeah.
Looking at black, I see more really good removal, and then some cool payoffs also, things like Sedgemoor Witch, like we mentioned. Green is really interesting because this cube has a lot of green cards. I mean, it has more green cards than red cards, almost as many blue. And green just doesn't strike me in my mind as being like a Spellslinger colors. That's really
Oh, for
interesting.
sure.
Tell
Yeah.
me about what the different colors add to the cube.
Yeah. In short, pretty much what you would expect from their iconic instance and sorceries. So yeah, like you said, with white, you get your pinpoint removal of Swords of Plowshares, your board wipes like Day of Judgment, stuff like that. So pretty much any iconic instant or sorcery from a color, those kinds of effects are going to be in there. Green, though, does a lot for the playability of Epic Experiment specifically. It provides fixing, which for the cube, each player starting with 2 copies of Epic Experiment. It's a gold card. You want your fixing to be top notch. It ramps you towards your big Epic Experiments. And it also adds token creation, which is like a foundation of creature combat while maintaining an incredibly high density of instance and sorcery spells. So, although there's only like 54 creatures or whatever, I went back and I counted all the like token making cards, and I think there's like 105 of them or something. So in general, there's still that like baseline of creature combat that you'd come to expect from like playing a cube.
Yeah, like this cube actually reminds me a lot. I was thinking about the cube, the Creatureless Cube by Ollie Beeks that I played at Boston Cube Party.
Mhm.
And that cube was really interesting because even though it was the Creatureless Cube, it
Yeah.
had so many tokens that it really did feel like, oh, there's creatures everywhere. And I feel like this cube, it does have similarities. And if anything, it could go really wide, I would think, with so many token makers.
The Creatureless Cube is one that I had seen a while ago and kind of scanned it and cross referenced it a little bit to just kind of see what other cubes were doing in a similar space. Obviously, with that one, you get access to, I think there's more like artifacts and enchantments that kind of do like game winning engines and stuff like that. But just being able to provide that baseline with the tokens and stuff like that really does a lot to help players feel more grounded.
For example, if the Creatureless Cube really was creatureless and there was no tokens, how do you play Magic without any creatures? I mean,
Yeah.
like, would it just be all burn? Like, or how do you win the game in my mind? So it makes sense to have tokens.
Oh, yeah.
One thing that this cube does remind me also of that I had on a previous podcast with Kirby, we recently spoke about the omnipresent imposters cube. And in that cube, each player starts the draft with two copies of the card Omnipresent Imposter. The archetypes and the packages and the synergies really branch off of Omnipresent Imposter. For
Mhm.
example, changeling effects or card name matter effects. And this cube definitely reminds me of that with each player getting two copies of the card Epic Experiment. How does players actually getting this card change their draft? Do people tend to go into it thinking I'm going to build around this card? Or does it more give them a perspective on what the cube is trying to do?
Mhm.
Like, how does Epic Experiment actually affect the drafting and gameplay?
Yeah, pretty radically. Players do generally end up in is it colors more often than in a regular color balanced cube. This takes on a few forms like mostly mono red, burn decks, straight up is it, which at sometimes at a table there could be two or even three pure is it players. Variations of teamer decks. Grixis and Jeskai are also more common than non is it based three color decks. As for playing them, they're generally more played than not. Starting your draft with two top end cards lets drafters focus on taking fixing and early game plays more highly. One of the stated goals of the cube is to showcase Epic Experiment, so every single card in the list makes Epic Experiment better in some way. Ramp, fixing, and big fun spells are the obvious inclusions, but things like card draw, rummaging, and other deck thinning lead to a bigger game where you amass more resources and are more likely to see your Epic Experiments or the fixing for them. Things like sweepers and life gain also follow the same patterns to make the game go longer.
One thing that you do write about on the outline, definitely for sure, is games tend to go into like the later game, which makes sense. I mean, with the cube having so few creatures, I would imagine that it's hard to actually be an aggro deck and like really kill your opponent quickly unless you're something like a burn deck, which there is definitely a lot of burn here. Things like burst lightning, galvanic blast, lightning bolt, all the way down to even shock. I mean, there's definitely a lot of burn in the cube, which makes sense. If you want to have an epic experiment pile that you do X equals 10 and then you're hitting 10 burn spells and you just insta kill your opponent. That's sweet. And then, like you said, there's a lot of board wipes. Tell me about like the tempo of the game. Do games tend to go longer or are there games that they go shorter? How long do games generally tend to go for?
In general, the cube is built to lend to the longer game. Like I said, with all those effects previously mentioned, it by design, I kind of want to stretch it out a bit while people have a chance to draw their epic experiments and have the mana and the fixing to cast them. So that's all like very intentional. There are aggro and burn decks that kind of add like a little bit of a counterplay or a check and a balance to the gameplay. It's not like players are just sitting there and dirtling all day long. Like you definitely do have to make plays that affect the board and stuff like that. In general, the aggro decks I had found to be like historically a little too good.
Oh,
Just
interesting.
because, yeah, just because burn and like a lot of those token creation things, they just get up and under the players trying to cast big spells. So it's been a real fun design challenge to like slowly cut down on some of those effects while still making that deck feel real and fair and balanced.
I could definitely imagine if you go like turn two, gather the townsfolk, turn three, hop to it. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
that's five power of tokens like right away.
Yeah,
So you have to do something with that.
yeah, for sure. The it's funny you say that because essentially in white there is two spells that make either three or four tokens essentially. I found that I had to like cut those out of the cube entirely because, like you said, when you go two, three, four, five, and just make a ton of tokens every turn, like unless somebody gets a sweeper, there's not much they can do about that. So that goes into the intentionality, like I was saying, of like trying to attack aggro from like certain points while I'm editing, but keep that same feel there, but just have it a little bit more fair, you know?
Yeah. Like I could definitely imagine there being like an awkwardness in some ways to designing the cube when there's so much removal in the cube. Like, for example, there's Path to Exile, Swords to Plowshares, some of the best removal, like in Magic in
Mm.
this cube. But then if people are really going wide, for example, if I have Hop to it and gather the townsfolk and I have five tokens, Swords to Plowshares doesn't look that good against
Right.
that.
Yeah. The removal spells, they're a little bit worse than, they usually would be. Like, in Vintage Cube, you're taking swords over like most cards. They're a little bit worse in evaluation, but they still play a key role because some of the creatures I previously mentioned, like Young Pyromancer and Sedgemoor Witch, stuff like that, the creatures that actually are good enough to be in the cube, they'll run away with the game essentially. So I found it very important to like have people have the opportunities to have removal and interaction for those. Otherwise, it's like, yeah, your opponent resolves turn two Powermancer and you can't do anything. And, the game is just over before it began. But yeah, there's definitely a balance between sweepers and pinpoint removal. Also, because of the adventure and omen creatures, there are a fair amount of larger creatures that hit the board occasionally. And, having Doomblade to deal with your opponent's 4/4 flyer or whatever it'll save you in a pinch. So
Yeah. This cube definitely has like a lot of big spells, big creatures, and it reminds me in a lot of ways the Live the Dream cube, which is a cube that I've always thought was really interesting. Like, for example, there's time stretch in the cube. I mean,
yeah.
8 blue, blue. Target player take 2 extra turns after this one. And there's Mnemonic Deluge, 9 mana in blue. Exile target instant or sorcery from a graveyard. Copy it 3 times. There's Crush of Worms, 9 mana. Create 3 6/6 worms with 12 mana flashback. There's the ultimatums. There's a lot of big spells in this cube that would want you to go late game.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, the fixing and the ramp that's there is meant to facilitate the casting of those spells. In general, in any other cube, you see a 10 mana spell, you're like, I'm never casting this. Your evaluation goes way down. But here, it's a little bit more geared towards, like you said, living that dream. There's a lot of fun stuff you can do. And it's almost like I built a sandbox of like all these crazy effects that, I just encourage people to take big swings with all that stuff. The ones that are still there, they are playable and they are good,
I mean, Crush of Worms like brings me back to when I was a kid. I had this in like my bulk rare box as a kid, and I was like, "What do you do with this card?" I mean, it's 9 mana. How do you ever play this? It's sweet though. Or Time Stretch brings me back to my evil arc when I was playing like Narset and attacking and getting like a bunch of extra turns.
Yeah, funny story is the 5 mana take extra turn cards. I ended up having to like cut all those, and Time Stretch is the only one that's left because it was a little too easy for people to cast Epic Experiment, hit an extra turn card, and then there's a lot of like graveyard recursion, like flashback, mystic retrieval, all that fun stuff. And like, I didn't want anybody playing solitaire too much. So Time Stretch is kind of like that big flashy one, but the other ones, leave those.
That's funny that you mentioned not wanting the games to feel solitary, because in my mind, Spellslinger, while it can be very interactive, which we're going to get into, it also can feel solitary. I mean, I'm going to play a cantrip. I'm going to play another cantrip that'll draw me. It'll trigger my young Pyromancer. I'm going to draw another 3 cards. I'm going to counter the next thing you play. I mean, Spellslinger can definitely feel control in a lot of different ways. I think it's a really interesting like dichotomy, Spellslinger. There's so many different ways it can be built, like it has in this cube. And another question that I have for you here is, so each player gets, like we talked about, 2 copies of the card Epic Experiment.
Yep.
Which is a blue-red card. So do players ever break away from playing blue-red, or is blue-red the entry point? Like in some ways, it almost makes me think of like Pulp Nouveau cube that players only get swamps, where it's kind of like, okay, well, I'm going to be playing black most likely because I get swamps. And in this cube, well, I get a blue-red card that I want to play. I want to play blue-red.
Yeah, like I said, in general, they do get played, but at every table, there could be 1 or 2 players that potentially either don't play the card or they're not in those colors. Like I said, there are, green, white, and black cards. But the main thing is I don't want to like cram this card down people's throats necessarily. For whatever reason, if their draft goes where their deck's better without them, then, that's okay. Or I don't want to force people to use a card that just like doesn't speak to them, So occasionally, yeah, there'll be like a black-white tokens deck that like goes wide, or a green-white tokens deck that does like the populate thing, populate their big tokens. But in general, my goal is to make Epic Experiment as playable as possible. So whenever people don't run it in their deck for whatever reason, it just gives me a great problem to solve as a cube designer, where I'm like, okay, how can I make this card the best that it can be, or the most consistent possible considering what it is? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Have you ever considered making it that it can be cast for any color? Because that was one thing I was thinking about, because the way that it basically forces you to be, is it X? Like we were talking about, Grixis or Teamer. What if you could be a mono white deck and you could still play the Izzet card? Like, is
Right.
that something you've considered?
Yeah, so when I was coming up with this whole cube, the whole reason I built it was because basically I had other cubes where I tried to make Epic Experiment playable as like the Is It card, and it never was well supported enough. So how can I make this card playable? Maybe if I make a whole cube around it, it'll actually be good. So because of that, I kicked around a lot of different ideas of like how to structure it. There was a previous iteration of the cube where the epic experiments were mandatory inclusions in your deck and not
Oh,
optional. Yeah, that was an interesting part of it, but I found that it made the pack one pick one situations a little too on rails because it's just like fixing. You take fixing over pretty much anything. You have to play this gold card, and so again, I didn't want to cram it down people's throats or anything. There's also some other workarounds where I had considered having experiment in the epic experiment in the command zone or the companion zone, where it's like it's there, they'll always have access to it, it's the namesake card of the cube, but that felt like a little too samey. Like I'd done some demo play tests with it, and like again a little more on rails. Colorless though is it's definitely a good idea in that same vein where it's like, how can we make this card super duper playable? Basically, I kind of stopped trying to make those iterations because I don't have the time to like play test them all. Whereas like I have the most hours logged on the current version where it's optional and like very like low on rules baggage, you know what I mean? So I'm kind of settled there, but I could probably do some play testing with the colorless version, and other people, if they find something they like about the cube, I encourage them to like make their own versions. They can make changes like that. For example, there was a group of people that reached out to me that basically run a arena cube league or something like that, and they had made another version of my cube where it's like all cards that are in arena essentially. So there's just a certain amount of like man hours that I don't have for like making those kinds of testing, you know what I mean?
totally get it. I have so many cubes, and then there's so many cubes in my local play group that it feels like sometimes my cubes are like, oh, I don't even remember what's in this cube. Let's try it again. So I get that. When you do get the chance to play it, you want it to go well. So like an experiment like that, where it's like, oh, it's interesting though to try it someday, maybe.
Yeah, me and my brother, he's been playing Magic just as long as I have, essentially, and we'll do a lot of like one-on-one cube drafts, and he's just been so great for like helping me play test all these changes and different versions of like how I could take the cube. So I give him a lot of credit for helping me, but I can only put him through so many testing sessions before I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Speaking about not wanting to like overload players with like, oh, what
Mhm.
if it was colorless or something? One thing that's definitely true in my mind about this cube and spellslinger in general is that it can be higher complexity.
Mhm.
You have to really do a lot of sequencing, holding up interaction at the right time, or when do I play my payoffs that it won't just get immediately killed and I won't get any value. Like, for example, a Tolerant Sky Summoner being a 4 mana 2/2. It doesn't feel good if you play it on turn 4 and it dies right away,
Yeah.
especially in a cube with so much removal. What is the complexity of this cube in general? Like, in some ways, this almost reminds me of my friend Kyle's Control Cube, where
Mhm.
it's really a lot of on the stack interaction or really instant speed timing. You have your payoffs and you protect them. Tell me about that.
Yeah. In my cube overview, I mentioned that it's not necessarily intuitive or geared towards newer players. It's more for a like more franchised cubers essentially. And the lack of that intuition would be like a combination of the mechanical diversity, the context shift, and then complicated stack resolutions. So, real quick on the context shift, that's one of the reasons that I like experiments being optional because people are already sitting down with this weird card in their pool. They don't want to also be like, oh, I have to play it or some other like extra rule modifier to it. Like I like the idea of it. Besides you starting your draft with the two, it's just like good, clean magic otherwise. And then for the stack resolutions, when an epic experiment resolves, you need to pick the targets as you put everything in order on the stack. If I hit three lightning bolt effects, as I stack them, I need to like make all these targets. And then, you resolve them one at a time. But there's so many different spells that can go on the stack that like change the board state as it goes that it can get a little wonky where it helps to kind of be used to those huge stack piles essentially.
Like I could definitely imagine like you do an epic experiment for like 5 mana or something, and you get a Wrath of God. So you get a board wipe, you get some token makers, and it's like, okay, first I want to put the board wipe on the
Yep,
stack to make sure that I kill all the opponent's stuff. And then I want to put the token makers, and maybe then I have a haste enabler for the tokens to
yeah,
give them all haste.
exactly.
And then I have a way to give them pump them all. And it's like I could definitely imagine that you definitely want to be thinking through almost like your deck strategy, like as you're building it. What
Yeah.
is like the ideal epic experiment pile to go off that maybe could even win you the game? I'm sure that there are epic experiment piles that are just like, oh, you're dead.
Yeah, for sure. Also, in terms of the mechanical complexity as well, a note on that is when building the cube, I already had an incredibly restricted card pool that would be viable for what I was trying to do, and like within a set power band as well. So I couldn't afford to make many concessions based on mechanical complexity and diversity. I know a lot of cubes, they'll like do things where like, oh, the only kind of counters are +1 counters or something like that. That's good design. I'm well aware of that. But for this one, because the main goal is to showcase epic experiment, I give myself a lot of leeway. Having like there's 2 commit a crime cards. They do a lot for the environment, but yeah, you got to know what all that stuff is essentially.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And going back to my previous question about do people often play the epic experiments and
Mhm.
do people often go away from it? This cube definitely has a lot of fixing and like really powerful fixing. I mean,
Oh yeah.
there's 3 of every shock land, the surveil lands, plus other lands like pain lands, the check lands. There's 2 of every fetch. There's the triomes.
Oh
This
yeah.
cube has
Keep
very
them
strong
coming.
fixing. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, is it common for people to go, is it plus all 3 colors? Like, and also, like we talked about, green has a lot of fixing in it too.
Mhm.
There's Bushwhack that can search for a basic land. There's many partings that can search for basic land. Farseek. I mean, the list goes on. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, it goes.
I could definitely imagine me wanting to go 5 color and play Cruel Ultimatum in the same deck as like Inspired and Titanic.
Yeah.
Just go
Yeah.
full greed mode in this cube.
The fixing and the like color piles. I know a lot of cubes generally like people want to stray away from that kind of stuff, like overpowered fixing. They don't like the idea of like a 4 color random good stuff value pile like being like the best thing to do. In this cube, it's a little more par for the course. I want people to be splashing and fixing their mana. And again, that density of fixing lands and effects kind of does the work of like that rules change that you mentioned of like experiment being colorless. I essentially just want people to have all the tools to like play good, clean Magic, essentially. Fetch lands themselves also like do double duty in the cube where they fix and they also thin out your deck to like make your experiments more potent and stuff like that.
Deck thinning.
Oh yeah. The cube is a 450 as well, so there is some variance where like not all those lands get juiced in there. In general, I want people to be able to do crazy game plans and stuff like that, so I give them the tools. The one thing about fixing is, it's not completely free. With shock lands and fetches, your life goes down pretty quick, and that's one of the reasons that like burn was so viable for so long, like burn and aggro. So because of that, there's like a little bit of a give and take where it's like, yeah, you can go pretty off the deep end in terms of your triomes and stuff like that, but it's not like 100% free. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely imagine myself in this cube trying to play 17 non-basic lands and like Crush of Worms, triple green in the same deck as Mnemonic Deluge.
Yeah.
Cast Mnemonic Deluge and copy it 3 times, and at the same time, Epic Experiment, all that.
Yeah.
Like,
If
I could definitely imagine myself trying to get pretty greedy in here.
if I
And
re-
it sounds like that's encouraged.
yeah, if I remember correctly, my cube's been played like once or twice on the CubeCon Discord. For anybody that doesn't know, I think every Wednesday they get together at like 6:30 on the CubeCon Discord and do drafts on Draftmancer and play through MTGO. If I remember correctly, somebody did a deck once where it had like all 3 of the ultimatums that are in the cube, Inspired, Cruel, and Titanic. And I think they went 2-1. Like they actually did the thing.
I mean, that's sick. That's where
Yeah,
I want to be.
they lived the dream, that's for sure.
Coming back to that burn part, there definitely is a lot of burn still in the cube, and that's kind of what red spells do. I
Mhm.
mean, tell me about how you had to pull that back and the changes you've made to red to allow the cube to go later game.
Burn and tokens are kind of synonymous in the cube. for token cards, for example, like you can imagine that Monastery Mentor would be really crazy.
Ooh,
Or
yeah, that's a broken card.
if you know heroic reinforcements, that's
Yep.
yep.
Wow. Yeah.
Stuff like that. Like the game's just over essentially. There's like those real power outliers, and then there was also a density of red burn spells that are like slightly larger. So like instead of like shocks and lightning bolts, we're talking about char, brimstone volley to deal 5, stuff like that. So I was cutting down a little bit on the big burn spells, make the burn players have to work for it a little bit more, maybe push them toward epic experiment where it's like, maybe just straight up shocks in my hand isn't going to do it. But if I can flip 4 shocks at once, like maybe that's the oomph I need. And then with those slots that I cut out, I just replaced it with a couple of nifty things. Like there's like a foods package. Like I thought food did a really good job at kind of giving players a little bit more breathing room, increasing the big ramp cards. Because at one point, I thought that they were like too good, like the 4 mana ramp spells. But I like put those back in recently because I'm like, it ramps, it fixes, like this is what the cube is, it's what it does. And there's enough of them where like multiple players can get access to them and stuff. So editing burn has been like just a really fun like design problem and challenge that I've been working on for like a long time, honestly. But every time we play it, it's like, little tweaks here and there and to get it to like right where you want it.
Cube that has explosive vegetations. I'm happy. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
the classic, just explosive vegetation. That's great. And one thing that I could definitely imagine designing a cube like this, which you do talk about in your outline, is trying to avoid like feels bad. One thing that you mentioned is that there's
Mm.
no counters that can counter
Oh,
Epic Experiment on the stack. I imagine you would want to avoid cards that kind of just don't work off an Epic Experiment.
yep.
Like you cast an Epic Experiment, you hit like a spell that's like, oh, this doesn't do anything right now, or like I
Yeah,
can't
like,
even use this, like a counter spell. Tell me
yep, yeah.
about that.
Counter spells were one that I identified pretty early on in the design process of being like not working with Epic Experiment. On top of that, once I outlined my cube goals, and one of them is to showcase the card Epic Experiment, it's like, yeah, if people are countering it, that's not what we really came here to do. And then also things like soft counters, miscalc or mana leak. It's like, I don't want to have an Epic Experiment in my hand and be like, oh, should I make it 2 less so I can maybe pay for miscalc? No, like,
You don't
we're
want
not.
people mana tithing
Yeah, exactly.
it.
Like we're not here to do that. And then again, if you flip it with your experiment, it doesn't work. So like it on both ends, it just kind of doesn't do what you want. On top of that, Thoughtseize was in at one point where it's like turn 1, just get rid of your big fun card like out of your hand. Identifying those power outliers and stuff that just like hoses the cube completely was something that like I did over a long period of time. Also notably excluded is Reverberate and Twin Cast,
I was gonna
which
say,
you
is there like Narset's reversal or something in
yeah,
this cube? Like,
which
I'll take it.
yeah, which you'd think, like would be really good in a spellslinger, but yeah, Reverberate would be like the power 9 of the cube because your opponent epic experiments for 8 or 10 or whatever, and for 2 mana you can copy theirs and do it first.
Yeah.
That's just craziness. I never had the chance to delve into it, but there's like a half-baked cube cobra list that's private that I have. That's the vintage epic experiment cube.
Oh,
Like all those crazy outliers, plus, if you had Black Lotus or Time Walk or Ancestral Recall, like you could get pretty nutty if you wanted to open up the power band, essentially. But I'm just like a fan of good, clean, fair magic, no infinite combos, stuff like that. So I keep it pretty tight. But again, that's one of those areas where it's like I don't have the time to explore it, but if other people thought it was cool, like it's there.
and tell me about some sleeper cards in the cube that you think that other people should try more. Like, there's a few that I see in here that I think are really cool.
Mm-hmm.
One card that's really impressed me in my Trinket Cube, which is like all about 0 and 1 mana cheap artifacts and kind of like storming off in some ways that you have in here, is Rally the Monastery.
Yep.
So that's 3 and a white instant. It's from the new Tarkir set, and it costs 2 less if you cast another spell this turn. Choose one, create 2/1 white monks with prowess. So prowess is really strong in here.
Yep.
Up to 2 target creatures you control each get +2/+2, or it can be removed. Destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. This card is like really impressed me. I like this card a lot, and I think people should give it a look more, especially in a really lower curving cube.
Oh yeah. On that one, that reminds me of just the power of modal mechanics in general in the cube. There's a lot of like command style cards, and those just are great for like doing double duty, making like a really playable environment and giving you like, options and stuff like that. In terms of sleeper cards, though, I've been really enjoying having those newer cards, stuff that's like less than like 3 years old, like 2 or 3 years old, probably. Keeping up with new releases and seeing what works. The first one that comes to mind is Wishing Well from Bloomborough. 3 and a blue for an artifact. You tap it to put a coin counter on it, and then you exile instant or sorcery from your graveyard with mana value equal to the coin counters on it, and you cast it for free. Every turn you go 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's just like a really fun build around, make your curve, perfect in that sense. And you just get a ton of crazy value from it. So that one's a bomb, not only in this cube, but just any like graveyard based cube. That can be a really fun one. Archmage's Newt, if anybody knows that.
Oh,
Does
I
the
remember hearing about this card, but what does that one do?
1 and a blue for a 2/2 salamander mount from Outlaws of Thunder
A
Junction.
mount,
Oh
yeah.
yeah. Whenever Archmage's Newt deals combat damage to a player, target instant or sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn, and the flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. But that card gains flashback 0 until end of turn instead if Archmage Newt is saddled, and it saddles for 3. So that one's just really fun to again curve out with. So, if you're doing turn one Lightning Bolt or turn one Ponder, and then you do turn two Newt, just like opens up some really clean lines for you to have like efficient early game plays. And like I said, any creature that's in this cube, like a straight up creature, it doesn't work with Epic Experiment, but if it's made its way in here, it really carries its weight or is like a really fun build around. So that's one that like interacts with the graveyard, and it just does a ton of double duty there.
Yeah, it's Salamander Snapcaster Mage. It's great.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's repeatable.
Snapcaster.
Yeah.
Snapcaster's in there too. And then one more sleeper I'll talk about is one I actually haven't seen in action too much, but I'm pretty sure it's crazy. And this one's an older one. It's a 2 mana artifact called Catalyst Stone.
Oh,
I think it's from Odyssey originally. And it says flashback costs you cast cost 2 colorless mana less, and flashback costs your opponent's cast cost 2 colorless mana more.
oh, flashback stacks.
Yeah. There's just like a huge density of flashback in this cube because A, they're just like a lot of iconic effects, and B, Epic Experiment puts those spells that you flip, either casted or not, in the graveyard. So there's a lot of self-mill shenanigans and stuff like that. And having like a fun flashback build around not only is good and fun in this cube, but maybe like an old border cube or something like that. That one can do a lot of work. Makes your Crush of Worms cost 2 less. So instead of 12, it's 10 or whatever. You know what I mean?
That's power.
Yeah.
Catalyst Stone into Crush of Worms. Wow.
Yeah, you got it.
That's sweet. And what are some other lessons that you learned from designing this cube over time that you think could be applicable to other cube designers?
Yeah, so it's definitely been a journey. I think I've been working on this one for like probably around 2 years now. And the biggest takeaway is just to not be afraid to try to answer silly questions that nobody else asked when it comes to your cube design. Creating context shift cubes is like an infinite time sink, but it's also very rewarding to make up your own questions and spend a lot of time and effort trying to answer it. Trying wacky ideas and tearing things down to create something new with the broken pieces. The Epic Experiment Cube is always an experiment since its inception. People should be encouraged to do their own experiments too. Some people might not get the point of what you're trying to do, and that's okay. But cube and custom cubes are a vastly unexplored space, and we need those pioneers and visionaries to help map it out.
Wow. Claps. That's good. I mean, I think every cube I design, somebody has said, like, why are you building that? That's silly. And, nothing great happens unless something silly was thought of.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, at the end of the day, it's a kid's card game, and we're just here to have some fun. Like this card that I built it around, is something I enjoyed as a kid, and it's like maybe I just want to relive that or help other people live it too, and do it in the context of Cube, it's a beautiful thing. So
Yeah. And I gotta know, what have been some of the craziest Epic Experiment piles? Like,
oh gosh.
have there been ones that just insta win?
Yeah, so the craziest piles I've thought of are with cards that are currently not in the cube anymore because they're too
Okay.
good. The first one that comes to mind is when I first built the cube, I thought it'd be a fun mechanic to have like land destruction in there.
Oh, like plow under copying it and stuff.
Stuff like that. Yeah. Both like stone rain stuff, which is a little more fair. Some of the more questionable inclusions, like Armageddon.
Oh
Um,
boy.
there's this one player. I also had Ashnod's altar in the cube and Phyrexian altar, I think, too. And this player basically he was using the epic experiments and he like make a bunch of tokens, sack them to make a ton of mana, play epic experiment, and then like the big combo that you would get together would be Armageddon, then Wrath of God, then make 5 or 6 tokens or whatever, and just like the game was over, you know. So those get pretty wonky.
Wow, that's
But
mean.
but nowadays you can expect a little more fun game actions to happen. So smaller effects, you know, like a lot of the adventure creatures, you get a lot of value from flipping like a bunch of those over, and you know the burn player feels good when they flip their 5 shocks or whatever. There's a lot of fun piles to make.
Absolutely. How about we jump into a pack one, pick one here?
Yeah, for sure. What do you got?
So this is a 15 card pack, even though you got 2 epic experiments. So players actually end the draft with 47 cards, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, interesting. Cool. So I'll read off the pack here. We got 3 blue red hypersonic dragon, which is flying haste 4/4. You may cast sorcery spells as though they had flash. This card is really cool. I also saw like Quicken in the cube.
Yeah.
Being able to epic experiment instant speed definitely makes it pretty insane, I would
Yeah.
imagine.
Hypersonic's a new one. Base rate, you know, a 4/4 flying haste, like is gonna do a lot. I definitely encourage people to live that dream of like flashing their sorceries or whatever.
We got
Uh,
Sunfall, which is, oh, this is a house, 3 white, white, sorcery, exile all creatures, incubate X, where X is the number of creatures exiled this way. In a cube with a lot of tokens. I mean, this could be Wrath and make a 7/7 incubate or something
oh yeah.
huge. I could easily imagine. That's a huge bomb. Then we got Enter the God Eternals, which, speaking of sleeper hits, this card, I love this card. I
Yeah.
played it when I played Standard Esper Hero. It does so much. It's 2 blue, blue, black sorcery. It deals 4 damage to our creature. You gain life equal to damage dealt this way. Target player puts the top 4 cards of the library in their grave, and you amass 4. So it's a kill spell. You gain some life. You self-mill a bit, and you get a 4/4. I mean, this card's great. I like this card a lot. We got
Yeah.
Gumdrop Poisoner, 2 and a black, and it also has Adventure for 1 black, create a food, instant. And when it enters, up to 1 target creature gets -X/-X until end of turn. X is the amount of life you gain this turn. This card's pretty cool. I can imagine like you do an epic experiment, gain a bunch of life, and then this can also just like finish. And then, then I'll give something -10/-10. That's cool.
Yeah. The making of food and the life gain does a lot to circumvent aggro for sure as well. So that's a key card.
Yeah. Then we have Tempest Heart, 3 and a green, 3/4, trample. Whenever you cast a spell with mana value 5 or greater, put a 1/1 counter on it. And it also has Adventure for 1 and a blue, instant, draw 2, then discard 2. So, yeah, I think the adventures are really interesting in here because you can cast them off the epic experiment for their adventure, and then they go in the adventure zone after that,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
You get kind of like extra value. Like if your experiment hasn't won immediately.
Yeah. And they also just provide like, you know, a lot of good early plays as well to help set you up, like that one, drawing and discarding, you know.
Yeah. And then we have Glacial Dragon Hunt. This card's great. Blue red, sorcery. Draw a card, you may discard a card. And when you discard a non-land, it deals 3 target creature. And it has Harmonize for 4 blue red. So basically flashback, but you can also tap creatures to help cast it. Then we have Baloth Cage Trap, 3 green green, instant trap. If an opponent had an artifact enter this turn, you can pay 1 green instead and you get a 4/4 beast. So, I mean, there definitely are some artifacts in here. Like, I think the dream would maybe be you turn 1, play a land, and then turn 2, play another one, and then your opponent plays like a Strike It Rich, and then you can be like, boom, I get a 4/4, got him.
Yeah, there's a lot of treasures bouncing around. Yeah, Baloth Cage Trap does in fact happen a lot.
That's cool. And then we have Join the Dance, green white sorcery, create 2/1/1 white humans with flashback 3 green white. Battlefield Forge, which is red or white paint land. Thought Scour, blue instant. Target player mills 2, and then you draw a card. From Under the Floorboards, I've always had a fascination with this card. I think this card's underappreciated.
Oh yeah.
3 black black or Madness X black black. You get 3 2/2 black zombies tapped and you gain 3. Or if it's Madness is paid, you get X of those tokens and you gain X life. I think this card's really cool. I wish the zombies didn't enter tapped. I don't know why they did
Yeah,
that.
they always gotta enter tapped.
Yeah.
Untapped zombies too good, I guess.
Yeah, I guess instant speed. Why you get blown out?
True.
Boring.
Oh yeah, true.
Then we have Servo Exhibition, one and a white. Create two 1/1 colorless Servo tokens. Wake the Dragon, four black, red. This card's interesting. I think it's from Lord of the Rings, right?
Yeah. Commander deck.
Create a 6/6 black and red dragon creature token with flying menace. And when this deals combat damage to a player, gain control of target artifact they control. So that's pretty brutal. And it also has flashback, six black, red. And then Stir the Sands, four black, black. Create three 2/2 black zombies. And it has cycling for three and a black. And when you cycle, you get a 2/2 black zombie. And then finally, Hollow Fountain, blue, white, Shockland. Ooh, there were some readers in that pack, but it's a spellslinger cube. I understand that.
It's pretty wordy, yeah. In general, like most cubes, if you do get a fetch land in your pack one, pick one, like you're pretty much taking that a lot. Yeah, fetches and triumphs are always really high on my pick list. Also, as cards like Young Pyromancer or Sedgemoor Witch, like those like really irreplaceable, efficient spellslinger cards. In terms of what's actually in the pack, a thing that I frequently see pack when picked one is premium board wipes. So Sunfall really jumps out at me.
Yeah.
Again, for those epic experiment piles where you wipe the board and then make tokens afterwards, Sunfall is like really powerful effect there. And also, yeah, those incubator tokens that it makes are like just gigantic a lot of the time. So that one's definitely up there. Enter the God Eternals, like you were saying.
That card's just sweet.
It does a lot, yeah. And like I said, even just with like fair versions of recursion, like Mystic Retrieval and Regrowth or whatever, you can end up milling your opponent for a fair amount or just like putting the game away by reusing Enter the God Eternals over and over again. So that one's definitely up there. Hollowed Fountain's all right, for fixing. Like any fixing that does one of the epic experiment colors is like pretty high on my list. I think I'd have to go with Sunfall. What about you?
That's interesting. So you don't take more highly blue or red cards, kind of hoping to be blue red for the epic experiment early. Do you just kind of assume you'll get the fixing to be able to play other things too?
Essentially, yeah. Generally speaking, red and blue cards are probably higher on that list. For the most irreplaceable effects, like this white card, for example, like I think I'd probably start there.
Yeah, I guess if you start early, then you can maybe wheel a Hollowed Fountain or something. I mean, there's a lot of fixing, like you said.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking that it just makes sense in my mind to take something that's blue or red to start and kind of stay open.
That's
Like
fair.
a glacial dragon hunt just seems great. I mean, it's a cantrip, it can kill something,
Yeah.
and then you can later flash it back. That seems great.
Yeah.
Or just even like a thought scour. I
Yeah.
imagine if players are like doing an epic experiment for like 10, the game's going late, that milling too could be,
Oh
be
yeah.
important.
Yeah, there again, you can recur thought scour enough to mill people like for six or something like that. So that can definitely pop off. Or it's good on yourself too.
True.
I do think that Glacial Dragon Hunt, yeah, like that's probably like the more responsible pick. I think it might come down to like a meta decision. Dragon Hunt is really good for, like you said, the rummaging, like just helps you get your fixing or get your plays, find your board wipe, find your whatever. That's huge. There's also madness cards, there's flashback cards, so that discard can fuel a lot of synergies.
Yeah, there
Um,
is like some madness cards like I saw. Violent Eruption, one red, red, red. Instant Madness, one red, red. Deal four, divide as you choose. That would be pretty sweet.
yeah, there's just the wind, which is like the madness bounce spell in
Yeah.
blue. Like bounce spells are like really premium in this cube because you can bounce huge creatures or whatever.
Or bounce like in a mass token.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, starting in is it that I definitely would not argue against that at all, and like different people have their different draft preferences for sure. The only other thing that like is in my favor for like picking a white card is because everybody starts in is it, there might be something worthwhile for like staking a claim in one of the off colors early.
Especially in
Um,
white where there's not gonna be as many cards. You could like send a signal.
yeah. So it's kind of a dealer's choice on that one. It's either like bigger bomb of a card that's like harder to cast and harder to play, or the like more efficient card gonna go in your deck, 90% of the time or whatever. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's a tough choice. Probably,
absolutely. I mean,
yeah.
now I'm kind of like reframing in my mind though after this discussion of if I could build an epic experiment pile in hope that you can like build it in like a certain way that resolves in certain ways. That seems crazy. Like having the board wipe first, have the tokens resolve after that. I mean, that
Mhm.
seems like, how do you lose after doing something like that? So I could definitely see Signfall being a really high pick. I might take that too, especially if I'm in a control mood, which I often am.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Well, everyone definitely let us know in the comments what you would take here. I mean, it's definitely a pretty strong pack. And this cube definitely, like we've talked about, gets your mind turning of like, oh, how could I build a cool epic experiment? How could I build toward that like perfect experiment?
Oh yeah.
And yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Harrison. It's
Oh
been great
yeah.
talking with you.
My pleasure.
Anything you want to say before we wrap up here?
Basically just want to shout out the Milwaukee Cube community. I have a lot of like really smart friends that helped me play test this over many different iterations, and so I couldn't have done it without them, and just like the Cube community there in general. And just shout out to the KubeCon staff and everyone in the KubeCon
Shout out
community
to
as
KubeCon.
well. Yeah, just generally speaking, like everybody that makes this like amazing thing happen, that like inspires us all to do all these crazy cool projects. Those people are the greatest. So
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I would say, but if anyone happens to be in Connecticut, we're always looking for more Cube people. So definitely reach out to me on Discord or Blue Sky or anything. And we often draft at Games IRL, my local game store, or other game stores. So definitely reach out if you're looking at Cube. And yeah, thank you all for listening. Please like, subscribe, follow, all that fun stuff. And thank you so much for coming on, Harrison. Great talking. And we'll
yeah,
see you all
likewise.
soon. Yeah.
Peace.